Shazam! Fury of the Gods is the newest entry in the DCEU and the second Shazam film overall. Billy Batson and all his foster siblings, now all bestowed with the powers of Shazam, find themselves facing a new threat in the form of the Daughters of Atlas. Let's not beat around the bush. This film is a mess. It is blatantly obvious this film didn't really know what to do with all of its characters. The first film managed to keep itself focused by primarily keeping just two leads at the center, Billy and Freddy. And plus, the film had a fun gimmick of a young teen trapped in an adult superhero's body, which manifested in him testing out his powers and in using his adult body in the way that an immature teenager would. So it had a bit of an edge to it. But with this film, there's a lot more characters to try to balance, and as a result, several of them are not really given all that much to do, and kind of get lost in the shuffle. It also clearly didn't know what to do with certain plot threads that it set up in the previous film, so it just kind of abandons them. This feels like a completely different crew trying to recapture the feel of the original film, but without knowing the magic formula. But it is the same crew. One of the same screenwriters and the same director, but the bite and edge has been sanded down. The humor is a lot weaker this time around. The jokes often feel so overwritten to the point that it pounds out any sense of humor, and the scary monsters and horror-esque set pieces that were in the first film are drastically toned down. I don't know if this was the result of too many studio notes, like if Warner Brothers told David Sandberg to tone it down and make it more kid-friendly, or from rewriting the script over and over again, or not rewriting it enough. I genuinely don't know what happened here, but this is a rough script. Legitimately, there are scenes in this movie that don't feel like they match certain scenes later on, particularly when it comes to character motivations. Like, it feels like a certain villain's motivations were changed late in production, but they forgot to go back and actually have that shift make sense within the previous scenes. Part of the villain's plan doesn't really make much sense to me either, and kind of felt like an artificial way of bringing about a way for them to be defeated at the end of the film. And Zachary Levi as Shazam, God bless him, he is trying. When he has to do an emotional scene, he actually does it really well, but when he has to say some of these unfunny jokes, man, does he really struggle. But give him credit, he is giving it his all. I never got the feeling that the actors, any of the actors really, were not trying. They clearly were, but the script was just not giving them the support that they needed. And there are a few really stupid moments too. By far, the worst scene in the entire movie was when one of the characters winds up solving a problem during the climax with the usage of a blatant piece of product placement. It even takes the company's logo and tries to turn it into a funny line for people to meme, probably unaware that that same exact quote was already a meme like 10 years ago. That was cringe-inducingly bad. And there's also the fact that the film's theme kind of feels like a rehash of the first film's themes. It kind of feels like Billy has to relearn the lesson that he learned in the first film, which was that he's found a family that loves and accepts him for who he is and doesn't see him as a burden. It doesn't feel like a continuation of the first film's themes, it's just restating what was already previously said. The villains are pretty generic, but at least they got some really talented actresses to bring them to life. Helen Mirren, Lucy Liu, and Rachel Zegler, they are doing their absolute best with the material, but they do manage to come across as either intimidating or sympathetic depending on what's needed for the character. And speaking of newcomers, there's a new character who is nothing more than a pen, and he is a fantastic presence. They're able to convey so much character from only his movements. The action's also alright. I do wish there was more weight to it, as it's not quite as horrifying as the first film, but for what it is, it's alright. And even though some of the characters aren't given a ton to do, it is still a great joy to watch these characters from the first film continue to interact with each other. Like I mentioned, all the returning actors are trying their hardest, and we even get to see some new character interactions, and they're enjoyable. Freddy actually gets a decent amount of screen time with the Wizard this time around, and I enjoyed their banter. And there is an occasionally funny bit that manages to match the humor and tone of the original film. Most prominently, a genuinely hilarious scene that involves Helen Mirren reading a note. Once you see the film, you'll know what I'm talking about. There was a little bit of a subversion with a cameo that was subtly poking fun at the Superman cameo from the first film, so kudos to that. And the climax does have a really good emotional center to it. Up until it does wind up deflating, precisely like I knew it would, but still, the emotions of the scene felt palpable nonetheless. So this one is tough, because I cannot objectively call this a good film. It's clunky, it's overwritten, it's uneven, and it's a serious downgrade from the first film. There's a few good scenes in here, and there's a few genuinely awful scenes in here too. But I do enjoy watching these characters and these actors, even with material that's pretty lackluster. But will the good elements overcome the bad elements for you? Only if you enjoy being around these characters and are in a really forgiving mood and willing to overlook its missteps. Which is quite the ringing endorsement, I know. I cannot stress enough how much of this film's problems stem from the screenplay. Almost everything else is great, but the writing in this is just so poor. But the actors trying to save the day did manage to win me over in the end. A disappointment for sure, but in the hands of a worse director and worse actors, it could have gone down in flames. And that's pretty commendable on its own. Shazam! Fury of the Gods manages to squeak by with a half-full shot. That review you just heard was an excerpt from my weekly review show This Weekend, where I review 5 brand new movies every single weekend. If you would like to check that out, then make sure that you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss it. And as always, if you want to see more of my reviews, you can check out my Letterboxd account. The link is in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.